Welcome to the AgEmerge podcast, brought to you by Ag Solutions Network. Your farming challenges are unique, so your practices should be too. We're here to share emerging ideas, build connections, and provoke conversation.
Get ready to improve your soil, your crops, your livestock, and your family's livelihood. I'm your producer, Kim Chase.
And I'm your host, Monte. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. Today we welcome Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, founder and director of the Ecdysis Foundation and director and CEO of Blue Dasher Farm. Jonathan was one of our speakers at the very first AgEmerge event, and his presentation was so powerful. Watching the work that he and his whole team are doing at Ecdysis and Blue Dasher Farm inspires us to continue to learn and understand the biodiversity necessary to nurture our land. In this episode of the podcast, Jonathan says, you know those entomology problems, those insect problems? The reason we don't solve them is because they're not entomology and insect problems. They're soil problems. And he says until we heal the soil, we're just going to continue to have that same problem after problem. Take a listen as he and Monte talk today about their research, discoveries, and passion to solve those problems.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the AgEmerge podcast. I'm blessed to be joined by Dr. Jonathan Lundgren from the great state of South Dakota. He said it is the best kept secret, so we're not going to tell anybody else about South Dakota. You don't want to go there because it's a great place to be. Anyway, Jonathan, welcome. I'm glad you could spend time with us today.
Always a pleasure to see you, friend. It's good to see you.
Well, Jonathan was at our very first AgEmerge conference in Monterey, California. Like he said, several of his team members have been on the podcast, and we've been able to talk about multiple issues regarding regenerative agriculture and the importance of insects and biodiversity. So him and his entire team have contributed a lot to the body of knowledge for regenerative agriculture. But for those who may not have met Jonathan before or know of him, I'm going to give you a chance to tell your story from the very beginning and kind of what has gotten you to where you are today and what fuels you, sir.
Oh, geez. Boy, in a nutshell, what's my story? Let's see. I'm a scientist. I have my doctorate in the field of entomology. I was a bug guy for a very long time. Came to the realization that just studying insects doesn't solve insect problems. And we have to have a better appreciation of that whole system. And as we started to trip through that, I worked for the USDA for a long time as one of their scientists there. And it just didn't seem, we all have metrics of success, right? Those little things that we use to say, okay, I'm a good farmer or I'm a good scientist, right? And man, almost nobody had better stats than I had. And so things were going just right as far as my career was concerned with USDA and within that whole space of sort of organized science. Things weren't getting better, right? I mean, I could still drive from South Dakota over to Minnesota where I grew up and visit the parents. And I mean, climates were changing still, pollution was rampant, rural communities were disappearing. And, the science I was generating was being generated for other scientists. It wasn't being generated to solve problems. My gosh, what would happen if we did science to solve problems?
Don't you know, at the end of every research study, it always says more funding is needed for additional research. I mean, right. The purpose of research is not to solve anything, right? It's just to do more research.
Well, it used to be, and it could be, and it can be, but as it's applied right now, a good, sexy problem is the best thing that ever happened because you get all kinds of grant money in order to study it. But anyways, I just decided, things aren't getting better. The farmers were showing me that there was a different way. The beekeepers were showing me that the implications of the current system, uh, in case, I hate to break it to the listeners, but insecticides kill bees. No matter what anybody says, turns out insecticides kills bees. Um,
Unbelievable.
yeah. And so I decided things needed to be done a little different. We needed an evolutionary scale change to our food system, not just incremental steps, but we needed something. We needed an asteroid to hit this food system, and it is. It is the collapse of our food system as we know it. The industrialized food system is happening before our very eyes right now. But there's a better way. And the farmers have discovered this, and they're doing it without science. And so oftentimes they're doing things that scientists say can't be done. And so I quit and pushed all of the chips onto the table, and we started Ecdysis Foundation and Regenerative and Blue Dasher Farm, where I live with Christina and the family, and that changed everything. So we now our metrics of success are how many acres have we changed? How many face-to-face contacts have we had with producers? How many relationships have we forged? Yes, peer-reviewed science is extremely important. Rigorous science is extremely important, but it has to be done differently. And the first step in that process for us was to realize that the scientists have to be farmers in order to connect with that problem. And so every day we have chores that the scientific staff here has to conduct here on Blue Dasher Farm, and and the impact that we've had over the last several years, it defies all logic and explanation.
So did you come from a farming family, Jonathan?
No, no.
Okay, so what was this like when you went from your career with USDA ARS to becoming a farmer? What was that like, that shift, and what are some of the things that surprised you?
Step one was I had all the answers for everybody, right? I was a trained doctorate and therefore an expert in my field, and therefore, I could explain all of the problems that people would be having and how to solve them, and put together a business plan for the farm, and that lasted, I don't know, maybe a morning. I don't really, I don't remember. But all of my preconceptions got blown out of the water, and the realization of all of the different skill sets that we need in order to be a farmer, and how problems need to be solved. You know, so I wear two different hats, right? I mean, I have the farmer hat now and I have the scientist hat. And when confronted with a problem, the scientist says, okay, well, let's pick this problem apart so that we can optimize the solutions to this thing. And it'll require, looking at the data and conducting different experiments under different scenarios to see which is the optimal response. Meanwhile, the sheep just broke fence, and I gotta, make a decision now using the best information that I have in my hand at that moment. That's a different philosophy than what I had as a scientist. Um, so yeah, made tons of mistakes, continue to make mistakes every day, and learn from them. And we always try to fall forward, as my mom likes to say. She says, "John, fall forward when you fall." And
Well, it's amazing what you can do as a farmer with some duct tape, cable ties, and a pair of pliers. It's the tools of the trade, let's say.
yeah.
So I remember early on when we first met, and one of the statistics that really stood out to me, and we'll see if you were a great teacher and I was a good student, okay?
Oh
But
boy.
for every one pest out there in a modern field, you name, let's go with row crop fields, there's 1,700 beneficial insects, and when we spray an insecticide, we might get the one, but we're nuking the other 1,700. Do I have that ratio right? Did I remember correctly?
Yeah, in terms of species, yeah, that I think is correct. And that's, globally too, right? For every pest species, there's 1,700 species of insects we can't live without. We don't understand them. They
Oh,
don't
wait a
often
minute.
have
I mean,
names.
we can't live without them. I mean, they're just bugs, right?
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
That's the problem. I think that we're facing as society right now is that we just don't understand why life and biodiversity is so important. We've got these blinders on, okay, if I've got a disease or if I've got a problem, one of my animals is sick or something like that, we give them an antibiotic, as quick as we can, right? Or if we have an insect problem or a disease problem on our crops, or we buy a product and we kill that one thing. But the implications, entomology problems, insect pest problems, the reason we don't solve them is because they're not entomology problems, they're soil problems. And until you heal that soil, you're just going to continue to have problem after problem after problem. So you got to get to the root, and that requires much different styles of thinking than what our current scientific infrastructure is well poised to address.
so at this moment, what you're saying is you're living life as a recovering entomologist.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah. We
But that's interesting to think about that. And so a couple questions I wanted to go on there is, I don't know if people know, but we are living in the largest extinction event on Earth at this moment. Okay. But it's not dinosaurs, that we always think of extinction events and meteors. It's not, something else, a mass flood or something that caused an extinction event. We're living in the middle of a huge insect extinction event, correct? But
life on Earth.
describe the nature of this and just how massive it is. I don't think people can say that, but they're like, oh, well, that's interesting, and then go on and get their coffee.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I think we can all remember what things were like on our farms when we were growing up, right? I mean, think of the barn swallows that used to fly around. Think of the SDSU, South Dakota State's mascot as a jackrabbit. Hell, when's the last time I saw one of those? It's been years, years.
Or think of the pheasants, the quail, right?
The wildlife, the invertebrates. I mean, hell, when you drive your car, you'd have to clean your windshield constantly, wouldn't you, when you were growing up? When's the last time you had to do that? We've lost 70% of the biomass of invertebrates over the last 30, 40 years. Science has shown this. That's the food web that supports everything else, including us. And without it.
But we're all living longer lives. We're all living lives that are easier than ever before, more technologically advanced than ever before. So what's the big deal? We all have plenty to eat.
Yeah.
It's not a problem. What are you talking about?
Well, I don't know that that's true anymore. I think maybe we've peaked out. Technology has shown us what's possible, but I don't know that it's made us any happier. I was talking with my son. He's recently graduated from high school, and I asked him, what proportion of your friends and your class, your graduating class, reads books? And he's like, 10%. Like, that sounds about right. And I asked him, what proportion of your class is on antidepressants right now? He said 90%.
Wow.
90% this next generation. As technology has replaced simple community interactions, connection with the natural world, connection within our community and our families. Are we better off? Is that whole system falling down right now? I could go on. So
No, those are
we
great questions we all have to answer.
there's within every law of thermodynamics, um, there's a little nugget that they reserve for unpredictable events that tends to tear down highly organized systems into a steadier state, lower energy level equilibrium. They call it entropy. And, you know, the more that we try to control the system, right? The more that we build up the rigidity of that system, the more the natural world wants to pick it apart and bring it down lower to a steady state. And I think that that's what's happening in our food system. And a regenerative food system is one that is steady state, that can be maintained. Because right now, the current system is being maintained by greed, and the farmers are the victims, as far as I'm concerned.
The AgEmerge podcast is brought to you by Ag Solutions Network. The ASN team is hands-on, digging in and invested in regenerative agriculture. Along with the proper plant nutrition and biologicals to boost your soil microbiome, we provide the ideas and implementation guidance to support you on your soil health journey. So stop farming the same way and contact Ag Solutions Network today at asn.farm.
That is a great definition of regenerative. And I've always, people talk about sustainable, and that was the buzzword in the past. And it's like, there's no way we can keep doing what we've been doing for another 1,000 years.
No.
Does it pass the 1,000-year test? It don't even pass the 100-year test. It says
Nope.
current production practices will run out of arable land in 80 years. But that's more for certain than climate change being a problem in 80 years. And yet,
they're totally related, aren't they? Yeah.
Land use and climate interaction they're connected.
Oh, so, absolutely. But that gives us a real opportunity.
I know. Yeah, that's true. All right. So one other detail. Just to make sure I remembered correctly, but there was another person who's JL is his initials. He also said that the amount of neonic insecticide that is contained on one corn seed has the potential, doesn't mean it does, but has the potential to kill up to how many bees is that?
By my estimates, it's about 164,000 bees, one seed.
Times, on average, we're planting in the corn belt 36,000 seeds per acre. That's a lot of zeros behind that. That's like let's see, 0, 0, 0. That's a 500 million bees.
Yeah, right. When you start thinking that there's 95 million acres of corn.
Yeah.
Almost all of it's treated.
Mm-hmm.
Wonder what's happening to all the life, huh?
Yeah, my calculator don't have enough. But then the other interesting thing is the persistence of this. And I find that interesting as one of the studies that came out of South Dakota there is, were you part of that, where it was taken up into sunflowers 5 years after a treated seed had been planted on that farm, and you found neonic in the sunflower at a deadly enough level?
Yeah, it doesn't take a lot, right? It doesn't take a lot. And it's getting into organic farms. It's getting into the water. It's getting into the soil. It's getting into plants that have never been treated before. I had a friend call from Montana about white-tailed deer. They were finding jaw deformities in about 70% of their hunter-killed deer. And then the males, they had genital deformities. And so together with a colleague up on campus at SDSU, John Jenks, we had a graduate student, Elise Hughes Burheim, and she did a wonderful study that will never, ever be repeated again, where we administered neonics to white-tailed deer. And it was astounding what happened. Increased mortality in the fawns. The females had disrupted hormone levels, thyroid hormone levels. They were lethargic. Um, they smaller. All of these things, right, that contribute to what's happening out there in the natural world. And then we looked at hunter-killed deer in North Dakota. They had 3 times what we were able to experimentally generate under controlled conditions. And you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, we got to connect the dots, don't we?
Yep. So because of you, it's all your fault. We did
Mhm.
go to neonic-free seed
How'd that go?
about 5 years ago. It's gone just fine. And what's really interesting is the farms that we've recently acquired or rented. When I look at when I walk in the field and I see the bugs in the field, and realize I'm in outside of the Quad Cities in Illinois, so we get more rain and we have a little more faster half-life degradation of the neonics, so we can bounce back from it a little bit quicker, I believe. But you just notice a lot more life in the fields on the fields that we quit 5 or 6 years ago versus fields that have only been off for 1 or 2 years. And
Hmm.
the other interesting thing is at harvest, we see pheasants and grouse and quail and all kinds of birds now
Yeah.
in the fields that have been off of it for 6 years, where the fields that we just started on, they're not there yet. And I find that really, really interesting. Now, is it scientific and proven and replicated and everything? No, but I am perfectly fine.
That is the
Not
basis of
killing stuff,
science.
right? So,
The basis. Those observations that you're making right now on your farm are the basis of science, or the way it should have been conducted for the last, 100 years.
so knowing that, you started just a little tiny project, right? To
A little bit.
just to make pull us a couple samples here and there, and run some sweep nets and call it good at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What's that called?
Here, the Thousand Farms Initiative.
Oh my goodness, 1,000 farms? Are you crazy? You can't do that. That's too much.
Oh, yes, I think I may be. But there's a sense of urgency, and there's somebody's got to do something. There's enough pamphleteers out there talking about the problems but not doing anything. And that's not it's not in us at Ecdysis. So we decided we need bold action. We need to start filling this data void now, not later. And we need to do it right. Recognize that the farmers are changing things right now, and that they are developing these successful systems, and that science can be used to help support that in ways that it hasn't for a long, long time. Um, we currently hold the keys to the largest inventory of regenerative agriculture in existence. We have an archive of the nation's agricultural soils housed in the attic of my pole shed in eastern South Dakota on a regenerative farm, a museum level quality biological collection of our food system that's fully digitized and is changing how we conduct bioinventories. We've visited and deployed teams out to almost 900 farms over the last 2 years and done full systems inventories of these farms, looking at soils, water, microbial species, invertebrates, plants, birds, economics, management, the nutrient quality of each yield sample off of these things. And now we're trying to navigate how do we start to describe these different systems, and does regenerative agriculture indeed deliver on the promises that it makes?
So the problem is everybody's wanting a definition of regenerative agriculture.
Yeah.
You're on 900 farms, or close to 900 farms of the 1,000, a little more to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Hopefully this year.
oh yeah. And what I think that people who want a definition don't understand farming, because what is optimum for my geography where I farm is not optimum for the geography where we work with customers and do crop consulting in Indiana or in Western Kansas or in Montana or in California. Each one of those, you're going to do different practices to do it. And then the second thing is, as soon as we create a definition like the organic standard, we have now codified, we have stopped progress. That's it. We've stopped progress. And we've turned conventional organic, sorry, organic farmers, but most of the diehard organics, agree with me on this.
They get it.
We've turned organic into conventional with substitute inputs.
Yep.
That's it. And more tillage, right? So, I think the definition needs to be continuous improvement.
Yeah. So at the start of this, right? Regenerative systems are unified by principles, and I think that that's true. Okay. But I had to take a step back this year. So we've studied a continent's food system at this point, like intimately. Like we've gotten our hands dirty in these fields and met the farmers and their families, and on a scale that's never been done before.
Mm-hmm.
And that style of science, it provides an enlightenment that would not be possible if I was just working in Eastern South Dakota on a particular problem. Mm-hmm. Number one is I don't believe, and this is going to cause some controversy. Okay, I'm about to piss some people off.
You have never done that before, Jonathan.
Monte,
I mean, this is going to be a first here.
I know, and to attain what is possible in a regenerative system, two questions I think need to be answered affirmatively. Number one, do you grow food for your family and your community? Do you eat the food that you're producing on your farm? Number two, have human feet touched every acre of your farm? And if you can't say yes to that, then I think you can do better than a conventional industrialized model of agriculture, but I don't believe that you're going to attain the pinnacle of what a food system can in terms of environmental, social outcomes. And there's a lot to unpack in that. Those two statements, there's a lot there. Number one, we need a hell of a lot more farmers than we have right now. Number two, there's widespread cultural change that ends up needing to happen in order to attain those two questions for a lot of farmers. But at the end of the day, I think that is the direction that our food system needs to go if it's going to reach its lower energy stable state that entropy ultimately is dragging our current food system down into.
But it sounds like to me you have to be a PhD in order to go into farming if we're following your model now.
Oh, not a bit. Oh, okay.
No. How are we going to get the more farmers? How does that happen?
It's a great question.
How does that happen?
Number one, we have to start getting rid of the greed in our food system, right? That's what's produced this problem is land prices are completely out of control right now. What are you paying for an acre of land in Quad Cities area right now?
Okay, so a piece of would have been
prime crop.
Prime ground just sold 80 acres, had a wind lease on it for $13,900.
Oh,
it's actually a little bit off of the high. It has come down a little bit, but the prime ground has been batting for $15,000.
I tried to buy a parcel across the road. It was going to go for $9,000 an acre. I'm like, how on earth do you afford that?
Well,
who pays for that?
But what drives it is the revenue that you can generate per acre. Well, the revenue.
No, it isn't. Are you joking me? You're never in a million years going to pay off that piece of ground.
Right, but I'm saying the revenue that you can generate out of that is they look at 2.5%. So that'd be roughly $375 an acre rent is what it takes to justify that price. Well, how do we get to $375 an acre rent? Well, that's because we're raising 260 bushel corn and we're taking it times, $6 a bushel, and we're paying off all the input providers to get those big numbers to pay 375. Because if I don't pay 375, someone else will, or someone will want to pay 400 for it just to trade the dollars. But how do we get those high prices? Is because we have crop insurance that guarantees that we won't go backwards, that the taxpayers are funding half of the premium for, and the farmer's paying for the other half. And that's what perpetuates the system, is the guaranteed income per acre.
The farmers are totally trapped, Monte.
Correct. Because if you don't take out insurance, you can't get your operating loan.
That's right.
You don't have an operating loan, you don't farm.
They're farming for pennies on the acre.
Mm-hmm. And you have to buy new equipment to offset the income that you have, because that's your tax for thing. But when you buy new equipment, you don't pay cash for it. You take out a 5-year, 7-year loan on it. Well, then you have to keep making those payments the next year.
I was up in Brandon, Manitoba, talking with a farmer up there, and he's like, man, we had a bumper crop of canola this year. Oh my God, it was amazing. It was like, finally, we're going to get ahead. This year, every input I put on that ground went up. You have to drop $1 million for a combine now. It's like these jackals, these vultures are like standing in the wings, just waiting for a farmer to almost eke by.
Well, if you want to know what the nitrogen price is going to be, you take the corn price, divide by 10, and that's the price per unit of nitrogen. And that's how it works. So corn goes up, inputs go up, corn goes down, inputs go down. It's a very calculated system if you really look at it.
And it's supported by the industry that's supporting the price controls and everything else. And the farmer is just a victim in this scenario.
I don't know if we're victim. There's a lot of willing participants.
Yeah.
I'll tell you. Well, I'll tell you a funny story, and now this is going to get me in trouble in the hood. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Good. I'm driving by. I got a long-term cover crop plot. It's a replicated plot, and we've kept it in place now for 10 years, and we're analyzing yield and soil health quality and all those.
Were we on that ground?
That you weren't on that ground. You're on it on another place, but anyway, this is within the field. We're doing that kind of replicated work, Haney test, the whole works, and just not doing the bug sweeps and infiltration that you're doing. Anyway, I'm out there checking them. We're putting in the plot. I'm checking everything, making sure it's lining up on the right AB lines and everything, so we don't create bad data. So I'm leaving. I go right next door. Neighbors driving disc ripper. With his son in the buddy seat. So I'm like, he's teaching next generation.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, we'd planted the same day this spring and everything, and and it's just, you can't miss what's going on out there, right?
Yeah.
So I drive down the road another couple miles, and sure enough, there's a person who works for Precision Planting. And Precision Planting is great at all the new technology they got, to where you can put nitrogen on with your planter, very efficiently indexed, so you're not over applying, right? You're not over applying. But unfortunately, family doesn't have any of that on their equipment, and there they are putting on anhydrous ammonia, and the soil temperature well north of 55, and it hasn't even been close to 50 yet, and they're just putting on gas as much as you can, and I just, within 2 miles, I saw those two things. I'm just thinking, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And they know better.
Do you see the soil blow? Do you see the soil blowing?
Yes. And yeah.
Do they?
I don't know, because you drive by ours and it's clean. And then right on the fence line, there's dirt. And it's just, anyway, I'm not picking on them specifically. I'm just to point out the mentality. We've done this because we've always done it this way. And here we are teaching the next generation, because, spouse works at a tech thing, but the dad doesn't, right? So we're just holding on to what we've always done. And it's just so frustrating. And the other night I went to drive down and look at some triticale we got planted. Deer have been eating it like mad. There was 24 of them in the field, because it's the,
oh my gosh,
nothing else like it around. It's the 120 acre food plot. They just come there. And my wife and I, on the way there, we drove by probably a couple dozen soybean fields. 22 out of 24 of them had ammonia on already. And
Are you kidding?
I
Why?
can't get off the habit.
No
It's
joke.
easy. It's cheaper. And yeah, so you just put on a little more if you might lose it. It's the moron. So how do we get over the moron approach and changing this generational thing? What have you seen in working with these farmers? How have they done it? How did they come to that decision point? And how is what you're doing with the data supporting their decisions and helping others make those changes?
It comes back down to what I had said earlier, connecting with the natural world, connecting with your family, connecting with the community. I think that those connections give support that farm insurance and the vultures of industry aren't, I mean, they just can't compete with that. And so the way that we're I'll share a story first, and then we can talk a little bit more about. So the end result is that we've seen a test of these two systems. I mean, we will provide the data on it and all of this, right? Because 1,000 farms is so broad. I mean, we can see what's going on with with the industrialized system in Kansas. I'm sorry, Kansas farmers, but what's happened in Kansas is pretty prairie soil, and they tilled it for 150 years, and the aquifer's dry, right? The Ogallala is almost gone. The soils are beaten to hell. The rural communities are gone, right? That's the system. That's the system. I mean, it's in Illinois right now. I mean, if you want a crystal ball, head over to Kansas, all right? Then we go to Vermont. And the structure of Vermont is different, right? There's a lot of mountains and hills and stuff like that stop you. I don't think their soils were probably as good as Kansas's when they started. They've been farming the same piece of ground for 250 years. 250 years. And you can sink your soil probe to the hilt in black soil because they've been using these regenerative practices for that long. The nature of the system was just such that it lent itself to regenerative practice, what we're calling now regenerative practices, right? The test of the system is there. And yes, there's differences between the two regions and stuff, but the outcomes are very clear. The only way that we are going to feed our society is with regenerative agriculture. The other one is burning itself out.
So I'm a very much a free market oriented fella. Okay. I believe in empowering our customers to make a choice for our grass fed beef and, chicken, pork, eggs. And I choose to grow non-GMO and food value stuff, and it's harder and all this stuff. So I'm all about the choice, but the impact, of the other decisions is such, there's so many externalized costs to the conventional system care. I'm kind of a hybrid in the middle. I'm not, I'm still growing grains and for some premium, but I'm not organic. I'm kind of in between. I have some profit impacts on what I do yield wise. But it's a choice I decided to make myself. Okay. Or the market may choose to pay a little more for those value added traits. But where does that balance in your mind come in between the consumer choice, farmer choice reward system versus regulations where no, you can't use XYZ product or you can't do XYZ? How do those two balance each other out?
Well, it's a complicated question. So we've looked at the economics of regenerative versus conventional systems across North America at this point. And there's technically, if you look at the averages and the error bars and stuff on all of these, the more regenerative practices that you implement, it doesn't affect the bottom line. You produce just as much yield, you produce just as much economics as a conventional system on average, right? What that means is that you're not losing money by going regenerative. Mm-hmm. But what was really interesting when you start teasing apart the data, and I think that it gets to maybe your question a little bit, you can tell me whether it's true or not. The most profitable system and the highest yielding fields in every single system that we looked at was regenerative. But the problem is that the lowest yielding and the lowest economic returns were also regenerative. And I think that what that says is that there's other currencies that are being measured right now, not just economics. Why do people change? Maybe it's pride. Maybe it's or not change, right? Maybe it's family. Maybe your kids are sick. Maybe you're not having, maybe you can't have kids right now because infertility rates are through the roof right now in our rural communities. Maybe it's being a good neighbor. And instead of putting the tile drain and sending all the water over to your neighbor's place, all that filthy water that you just created on your farm, sending it down the pike, maybe that's not such a good neighborly thing to do anymore. And those other currencies might be what's driving this. And, at the end of the day, that greed, that economic currency that's not how a system maintains itself over time. That's not the glue that binds a food system. It's the sense of community. It's the sense of family. And we really need to reinstill that. Otherwise, our kids aren't going to want to stick around.
And if you think about it from an ecologist standpoint, we were always taught that, it's competition between plants and those kind of things. But really, there's been some revolutionary research in the last 20 years showing that, wait a minute, it's not this competition model like we were thinking. It is a community model. There's resource sharing between species, between groups of plants and species, and the whole systems within a natural ecosystem.
Symbiosis.
Correct. And have our thought process just hasn't caught up to reality?
Well, I think it is, whether we're realizing it or not. So evolution sometimes it's a pretty nasty thing to watch, isn't it? And we're living through an evolutionary event right now. The virus of greed, it's just like with COVID, right? It comes in like a lion, and then after a while, the only way that it survives is by tempering itself. And right now, we're seeing that with our food system, that the realization that the mining mentality and the exploitative mentality of farming had its day.
And is the key. And I don't know if it'll take a while for everyone to realize that, I think.
Well, it's going to be painful to watch them realize it, but guess what? They always ask when I talk, what's it going to cost me to change? Because I'm not against this whole regenerative thing. I just, what's it going to cost me? And I think that that's the wrong question. You got to ask yourself, what's it going to cost you not to change? And not all the farmers are going to be around at the end of this evolutionary event in our food system. But Ecdysis Foundation is going to be there to try to help those that are willing to listen. And we see a very strong and diversified food system at the end of it, where we remember what it is to functionally be human.
That's very, very interesting. So, talk to us more about Ecdysis, and obviously the 1,000 Farms Initiative is a big focus now. What else is going on, and what things are you looking at in the future with Ecdysis?
So, 1,000 Farms Initiative, we are working on thousands of farms across North America. We're kind of at the peak of that project. I mean, there's only so many cornfields that you need to show regenerative works on, right? At some point, deploying scientific teams from our farm here in South Dakota, it probably isn't going to be necessary anymore. At that point, so we're kind of at the peak right now. I view it as a bell curve of effort, and so as that starts to diminish, our goal is to start to develop citizens-based science, where we send out kits of sampling materials that farmers can use to measure their own farms and empower themselves so they don't have to hire somebody else to do it or whatever. And at that point, then they can interface the data right into our databases and learn not only from their own farm, but also from hundreds, if not thousands, of other farms around North America. At the same time that citizens-based science is starting to increase, we're also looking at globalizing 1,000 farms, because we can't just save North America's agriculture or show that regenerative ag works here. We actually have to show that it works many other places around the globe as well. And that's a tall order. Turns out the world is a pretty varied place. And so what might work in North America may or may not work as far as gathering data and community elsewhere. So
I love your crowdsourcing idea there, a citizen scientist. The data that you'll get will exponentially increase for the costs that you have incurred for that. So,
yep,
brilliant idea. How'd you come up with that?
Life's not boring. It's certainly not dull. It's it's in our ethos to try to empower the farmers and to realize that farmers are the leaders in this food system right now, not the scientists. That scientists are servants, and that's the way that it should have been all along. And so the idea of taking what it is that we've learned and giving it to the farmers is for free, of all things, is kind of right in line step with everything else that we're doing. So it's just making sure that data is still useful to the scientific community so that we can still learn from it, because there's caveats associated with citizen science projects like that.
Right. Making sure it's done and everything correctly. So, all right. So looking, you decide that
you think I'm crazy, Monte. Look at that. You can see it in your eyes that you think this is nuts.
Hey, you're an entomologist, so you automatically have a level of crazy. Okay, that's all there is to it, right?
Yeah,
but no, I don't think you're crazy at all. I want to know the extent of crazy by the time you retire. What do you want to know that you accomplished through all the work that you and your teams have done?
We're going to be able
20 years or however long you plan to pursue what you're doing.
We have a board. It's a cardboard box that we passed around the staff, and we wrote down all of the things that brainstormed ideas of. And I think everybody should do this, right? They should all have their own, like, in the future, if we are successful, what does the future look like? What does our food system look like? And it's one of the more inspirational things hung on our wall right now. And it says things like, being an ecologist, it will be exciting instead of depressing. And every food will have a story. Every plate has a story, and knowing that story, there'll be a lot more farmers, those kinds of things. From a scientific standpoint, I mean, we'll be able to put hard numbers on exactly what kind of an impact. We're at this point, it looks as though, and of course, the data is still coming in. We'll be able to offset all of our carbon emissions using our food system, increase biodiversity, reverse desertification, reduce or eliminate pollution associated with agriculture, while improving the resilience of our rural communities and human health.
and
And
the quality and nutrient density of the foods that we're doing, along with that corresponding health improvement to society,
yep, that's right.
along with
Sure
more
solves a lot
opportunity.
of problems.
Other, yeah, other than that, not much to it, I suppose.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a whole hard plan on watching it. I mean, we have GPS coordinates for every farm, and we know exactly what it is that they've been doing. In 10 years, we can use satellite imagery to watch changes to the landscape associated with regenerative agriculture.
So you're saying you're creeping on me. I got you.
Yeah, I mean, yes. And I'm going to stop there.
Uh-oh. So, yeah, you're going to pull up some weird satellite images. The cattle just came out of that field that you were in. So, and they'll be there again this spring. But
Yeah.
no, I really thank you for your ability to think not big, but huge and monstrously huge, right? It's amazing to me how you discover something and then you take it to the next ring of impact and then to the next ring. You've really not just kept yourself in the one silo, and you've built a team around you, and you have a voice, through documentaries and through all of the interviews that you've done to get that message out there. And man, you've just made an incredible impact, both on me personally as a farmer, and on the entire agricultural system. And I sure thank you for it.
Oh, I thank you because you are on the front lines, and you're the one taking the guff at the coffee shop, and you're the one that's actually risking things. So we need a lot more Monte Bottons out there. And yeah, so
I think one's
we're
enough.
in this together.
We need more people doing regenerative things. There we go. But no, anything else we should have gone over or covered while we had a chance to chat today?
I think we nailed it. Buttoned it up.
Buttoned it up. So I think some baby steps I'm going to walk farmers through that they can do. And I think you can take a look and just do some simple things. If you want to take some baby steps towards this, get some untreated seed, plant it, see what it is, because now is a great time to start the 5-year half-life degradation process in neonics. You can also look at incorporating cover crops, increasing some diversity, getting more growing things out there of greater diversity at more time to increase the bugs that we've got to work with and support bird species and those kind of things. Eliminate disruptive tillage, eliminating over-applying nutrients. Really think, do I need a fungicide? I doubt that you do, because those can have negative impacts on the soil food web, which impacts us. So there's lots of little things that you can do. And I'm sure you can also reach out to Jonathan's team at Ecdysis. And certainly you can probably be part, no more corn farmers, he said, but if you grow something.
Oh, no, we're still looking for cornfields. Yeah.
He can be part of the 1,000 Farms Initiative. Maybe this is something that's near and dear to your heart. Donate to Ecdysis because he is 100% self-funded and he needs your help in what they're doing. And he's doing some pretty amazing things you can hear. So thank you. And I hope someone listening here is going to do one thing, and that made this podcast worth it, didn't it?
Yeah. Yep. I think so.
All right. Thanks, Jonathan. Great to see you. And we'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks a bunch.
Thanks for listening to this conversation today. We appreciate Jonathan and his team as they have boots on the ground working to vet these processes and systems. And what I appreciate most is his acknowledgement that the farmers are changing things right now and how they're developing these successful systems, and that science can be used to help support that in ways it hasn't for a long time. It's exciting work, and we hope you'll join us on the journey of implementing soil health practices that work. Find out how we're helping growers do that by checking out our website at asn.farm. And there, you can click on links to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. There's a lot of great things happening and always something to learn. Thanks for listening.